dive right in. Today, we're looking at a book that didn't just ask questions about history, it basically threw out the entire textbook and suggested that maybe, just maybe, our greatest ancient achievements weren't entirely our own. I mean, really think about it. What if the gods our ancestors prayed to, the incredible monuments they built, and maybe even the very spark that ignited our civilization, what if it all came from somewhere else? That's the huge, provocative question at the very heart of what we're talking about today. And in 1968, a book came along that gave a radical answer to that very question. It was called Chariots of the Gods by Erick von Däniken. And believe me, it took the world by storm, with a simple yet absolutely earth-shattering idea. What if ancient civilizations got a little help from outer space? It's a theory we've just got to unpack. So to really get a grip on this theory, you first have to understand the man who made it famous and the pretty wild idea he brought to the mainstream. So who was this Erick von Däniken guy? Well, what's so crucial to understand is that he wasn't some stuffy academic. He wasn't an archaeologist. He was a Swiss hotel manager who just had this deep, lifelong fascination with ancient mysteries. Now, his background is, let's say, complicated. He was actually convicted of fraud and wrote one of his follow-up books from prison. All this kind of made him the ultimate outsider, the perfect person to come along and question the very foundations of accepted history. Okay, so at the absolute core of his work is something called the paleo-contact hypothesis. You've probably heard of it as the ancient astronaut theory. The idea is actually pretty simple, but the implications are profound. What if intelligent aliens visited Earth thousands and thousands of years ago? Our ancestors, seeing spaceships and advanced gadgets, wouldn't have called them aliens. They would have called them gods. And that single event, that contact, von Däniken argues, changed everything. And you have to remember, this book dropped in 1968, right at the peak of the space race and our obsession with all things cosmic. It was perfect timing. The book became an absolute phenomenon. We're talking tens of millions of copies sold, a movie deal, and even an NBC TV special hosted by the legendary Rod Serling. Von Däniken had clearly struck a nerve. But the reaction to the book was, well, split right down the middle. On one side, you had the academic community. They pretty much rejected it completely, calling it pseudoscience and pointing out how the evidence was twisted or, in some cases, just made up. But the public? Oh, the public couldn't get enough of it. It was this classic showdown, the experts versus the power of a really good, mind-bending story. So what was all the fuss about? What was this evidence that got everybody so fired up? Well, von Däniken's whole argument really stands on three main pillars. Let's break them down one by one. All right, pillar number one. This is all about what are sometimes called out-of-place artifacts. These are strange, baffling objects found in the ancient world that just seem way too advanced for the people who supposedly made them. For example, you have the Baghdad battery. Von Däniken looks at this clay pot with a copper tube and an iron rod inside and says, "See, this is an ancient battery. Proof of electricity thousands of years ago." Archaeologists, on the other hand, look at it and see something much more mundane, a storage container for sacred scrolls, which looks almost exactly like other containers found in the same area. And then there's the famous Iron Pillar of Delhi. To von Däniken, the fact that it hasn't rusted for centuries meant it had to be made from some unknown, maybe even alien metal. But modern science has a pretty clear answer for this one. Its incredible resistance to rust comes from a high phosphorus content in the iron, which was just a byproduct of how they made it back then. And here's the real kicker. Von Däniken himself later walked this one back and admitted it wasn't proof for his theory, but it still shows up in his book. Okay, so this brings us to the second pillar of his theory. This is the big one. Massive ancient monuments that, according to von Däniken, were just flat out impossible for ancient people to build. Some critics have bluntly called this the "our ancestors, the dummies" hypothesis. Think about the Great Pyramid. Von Däniken asks the questions we've all probably wondered. How did they move those gigantic blocks? How did they achieve that kind of mind-boggling precision without modern tech? But archaeologists have answers. They point to a whole mountain of evidence. The quarries were right next door. We have their copper tools. And most importantly, you can literally see their building techniques evolve. You can look at the earlier, clunkier pyramids and watch them learn from their mistakes in real time. And of course, you can't talk about ancient mysteries without bringing up the Nazca lines in Peru. Von Däniken's idea that these were landing strips for alien spaceships is maybe his most famous claim. But today, researchers are pretty sure they served multiple very human purposes. They were probably ritual pathways, maybe markers for underground water sources in a super dry region, and even giant astronomical calendars. The third pillar is a little different. It moves away from physical objects and into the world of interpretation. This is where the theory rereads ancient myths, religious texts, and art not as symbolism, but as literal descriptions of technology. Critics have called it the ink blot hypothesis, where you see whatever you want to see. A perfect example is how he interprets the Bible. For centuries, people have read the prophet Ezekiel's vision of a fiery chariot and wheels within wheels as a powerful divine vision. But von Däniken? He reads it and sees a detailed eyewitness report of an alien spacecraft coming in for a landing. He applies the same technological lens to sacred stories from all around the globe. And this image right here? It perfectly captures the whole debate. On the one hand, you have von Däniken's interpretation of the sarcophagus lid of the Mayan king Pakal. He sees an astronaut, hands on the controls, foot on a pedal, inside a rocket ship. But on the other hand, you have what Mayan experts say it is, a depiction of the king falling into the underworld, with the sacred world tree of their entire cosmology growing right out of him. It's two completely different worlds from the exact same picture. So when you take all three of these three pillars, the weird artifacts, the impossible buildings, and the reinterpreted myths, and you put them all together, what do you get? Well, you get a brand new and pretty radical origin story for all of humanity. It basically boils down to this four-step story. 1, aliens came to Earth a long, long time ago. 2, they gave us a technological boost, which explains how we built the pyramids and all that. 3, they actually tinkered with our DNA, maybe even interbred with us, to create modern humans. This has been nicknamed the amorous astronaut hypothesis. And 4, we, being primitive, mistook their science for magic and started worshiping them as gods, which gave birth to all our religions. It's a grand theory that tries to explain, well, everything. Now, whether you buy into any of this or not, you just can't deny the impact that Chariots of the Gods has had on our culture. So let's take a look at the legacy it left in its wake. Get this, over 70 million copies sold. 70 million! That number alone puts it in a category with some of the best-selling books in history, period. This wasn't just a book, it was a cultural force that completely changed how a whole generation thought about the ancient world. I mean, its footprint is everywhere. It basically created the ancient astronaut theory as we know it and inspired tons of movies and TV shows. But its legacy is also really complicated. The theory is still debated, for sure, but it's also faced some very serious criticism, specifically that it carries these racist undertones by suggesting that ancient non-European cultures couldn't possibly have achieved these wonders on their own. And that really brings us to a powerful final thought. Maybe the real unsolved mystery here isn't about aliens or ancient technology. Maybe the mystery is about us. Why are so many of us, today, so quick to believe that our own ancestors weren't clever enough or strong enough to build their own world? That's a question really worth thinking about. I'd love to hear your take on it. Drop a comment below and let us know which ancient mystery still totally fascinates you. Thanks for watching.